Okay, so thank you for having me and convincing me to do a talk. I'm afraid there's not going to be as much code on the screen as the previous talk, but this might be an interesting topic nonetheless. My name is Francis Hoogendijk. I work at the Netherlands Forensic Institute, which is a part of the Dutch government that does forensic investigations, but we're separate from the police who would normally do the first line forensic research. So we're part of the Ministry of Justice and Security, but like I mentioned, completely separate from the Dutch police. So they normally in criminal investigations would do the first line of forensic investigation. And then there's like this complete separate government agency that is able to do research and casework on cases that require that. And we have experts on almost every single forensic field. If you've watched any CSI and have some expert come on there, either we employ some of those or we have people that can tell you why that is completely impossible what they show you there. So it's in every single scientific field, so medical, biological, chemical, physical, and of course the digital guys. Those are the ones I work with. We have three main tasks. Obviously is doing casework. So either the police asks us early on in a criminal case to help them perform a task that they are unable to do, or the public prosecutor asks us to do something, or later on in a criminal case when it's already in court, a judge may forward a question to the NFI to write an expert witness report, which is also part of the work we do. Then we have we need to develop new methods to stay up to date and be able to answer all the questions, not only today but also tomorrow. A large portion of my work is also involved here. And we are also a knowledge institute, so we're supposed to share all the research that we do with appropriate partner agencies, and if possible, also with academia and the field. So vehicle forensics, usually we do those in two types of investigations. Those would be severe traffic accidents, and these also are investigated by insurance companies, but I have somewhat of a criminal investigation glasses on, so you are not allowed to harm anyone or kill anyone, period, but also not in traffic. So those are some of the investigations, and of course regular criminal offenses that are more general. Traffic accidents have really specific questions usually, because it's a very short moment in time where there are certain questions that are relevant. So first off, how fast were the cars moving? Because that implies someone made wrong decisions about speeds that they drove. Was the driver paying attention? What was the situation at the scene? Whereas like all the other criminal offenses, like where has the car been? When was it used? Who drove the vehicle? And how was it used? Those are questions that generally apply to all kinds of investigations. And there will be an effort to try and look for traces anywhere, both physical, digital, on people's cell phones, infrastructure, and of course also the vehicles. I really like this picture. It's from the Monroe Live YouTube channel. I don't know if you know this. It's like a small still shot when they visited Rivian's laboratory. And this really is I think how I and many of you see vehicles. It's like a big network of control modules, and everything else of that car is just scaffolding, holding it together. Like I mentioned, the rest of that car is also relevant for investigations. But we, of course, are mainly going to be looking at the digital part. And there's already, if you look into this topic online, there's a nice talk about vehicle forensics from a more academic point of view by Kevin Gomez from the I'm going to butcher this, but Technische Hochschule Ingolstadt. And so he's more of a theoretical PhD view on it. And there's also some talks by Noel Loudon from the UK, who has like quite the opposite, the more practical view on these topics. So he used to be in the UK police force investigating cars, and now has his own company that does that for the police. I try to augment both talks here. Yeah, so vehicle forensics, as you can clearly tell, is just like a really niche application of digital forensics, which is a far more broad field that already exists for quite a while now. But you really need some domain knowledge about automotive systems to be good at this, even though I'm definitely not the best, but it really helps. So digital forensics, if you look for some definitions, is like the process used to acquire, preserve, analyze, and report on evidence using scientific methods that are demonstrably reliable, accurate, and repeatable, such that they may be used in judicial proceedings. So it's basically just using the scientific method to support criminal investigations. And you really should take great care at what you're doing, because in forensic research, you're trying to uncover the truth of what happened, and based on what you report or give as results, some people may or may not go to jail, so it's definitely something not to be taken lightly. So hopefully enough of the legal part. So more of a technical view on this process, looking at the traces. First, you need to acquire your digital material. Then you need to somehow be able to mount it, or at least make sense of it. Because after step one, usually it's just binary blobs. And then you'll get to extracting traces, analyze them, and report on them. So the acquisition can be as simple as just taking chips off and reading them. And because forensic investigations always happen after the fact, something happened that was not allowed. So you're usually looking for stuff that is in non-volatile memory. Then you'll need to mount it. Automotive systems, at least that I've looked at, for some reason seem to contain so many strange file systems that you don't see anywhere else. Also, if it's not like a typical block device, but like raw NAND or NOR flash, there's not going to be a file system there. You'll need to go through some kind of flash translation layer or something else to make sense of what is inside that chip. And then you get to the extraction phase, which is like a digital forensics term of trying to find things in these files and folders that actually contribute to what is called like a trace. So you model traces, and in this example, it's like a visited page from a web browser, and it has certain attributes. So forensic tools, they allow you to essentially, after they've done all their tricks, drill down into very specific kinds of traces and look all the way back to the bytes from the files that actually contain that information. So this is a tool that's usually used for mobile phones called the Celebrite UFED Physical Analyzer. And then the next step, once you get all these traces, is analyze them. So what do all these traces that you are able to extract from a system say about the case that you're investigating? And usually these tools, they will give some kind of functionality to label traces and then make a report about the specific section. So this is one of the few forensic tools that is used for vehicle forensics. It's made by a company called Burla, and their tool is called Ivy. And then the next step is reporting. So once you have looked at all these traces, of course comes the, maybe boring, but also very required step of writing that all up into a report, because that is essentially going to be used in court to try to prove or disprove if a certain hypothesis holds and matches the one that a suspect is accused of. This is all the the happy flow with all the issues that can arise normally. So getting data from a system, maybe hard or not so hard. Finding traces in there with all the levels of proprietary stuff that we find in the world of automotive can be a challenge. And then having the right automotive domain expertise to make sense of that data, if it's reliable or not, is a challenge in and of itself. But we are experiencing some difficulties way earlier in the chain getting that data out. Because by law, you need to, as developers, protect the user's privacy and make your systems more secure, which is absolutely a good thing. But this makes lawful investigations much harder because the systems are pretty secure. Data is now becoming more and more encrypted. So just getting to the point where we can start analyzing data is becoming very hard. And some of the questions I normally get are, why don't you just ask the manufacturer to help you with this? That is usually unsuccessful for various reasons I won't dive into, but it's a challenge in and of itself. So, as I mentioned, we encounter encryption very early in the forensic process, and there's basically two ways to try and get around that if you don't get any assistance from a manufacturer. Either we dump all the data from the system and try to figure out how it's encrypted. So we have to reverse engineer from the software that is handling this data, how it's handling it, try to obtain the key that is doing the encryption, and then decrypt it. Or the second option, so the first one doesn't need the device to be on, which is preferable because if you're doing your investigation, you can make sure that nothing in that data set was changed. Whereas in the latter, you need the device to be on because then you try to obtain access because inside that system, everything will be normally decrypted already. And then you try to acquire it from the system itself. And that's easy to say, just obtain access to the system. But that's, of course, quite a challenge. And this is where I think security researchers and forensic investigators are more and more overlapping in their field of work. We need the same knowledge, domain knowledge, but also about how systems are designed in general. The same skills to analyze or reverse engineer these systems. We use similar tools like Scapy and other really great open source tools to be able to do our work. And we analyze complex digital systems, but our goals are slightly different. So, of course, you want to make systems more secure, but for our forensic purposes, getting access to this system is only one means to another end, which is analyzing traces to see if there's something in there that we can use to prove if something happened that was not allowed. So there's this massive elephant in the room. You need responsible disclosure to make systems more secure. But in forensics, we're only using access to the system as like a intermediate step because we need something that comes after. So it's really delicate to go around this. Because if we find a way to get into a system to acquire data and we would responsibly disclose that method, we put in all this effort for it to be closed again, and then we get no collaboration or way to access this data anymore. So especially the acquisition method is sensitive, but sometimes even just the reporting on the artifacts that you find inside the system may be sensitive. So, for instance, I think it was already quite a while ago, but there was one guy who was buying salvage head units from Teslas, and he said, "Oh, I can do just a chip off, and your complete history of locations is in there." And then Tesla, they made one software update, and all those locations were now evicted from that specific database, so they're no longer stored on the system. So these are things we have to take into account. But on the other hand, the only way to get a community to advance is to share your knowledge. So this is quite a delicate balancing act. And it's something that the market is catching up on. For instance, for mobile phones, this is already known quite a while, and there are several companies that make forensic tools to help law enforcement and other agencies with this. Then, like the agency can just buy a tool from a specific company. It's a forensic tool, and they just write in their report, we use the appropriate tool to get data from the system. But it's just a nicely packaged box of exploits, of course. Whereas for vehicles, it's quite a bit more complex than that. Like a phone is just one device with a USB port. And if you use the tool, you just plug in the USB port. Sometimes you need to press a few buttons to get it in the right state. And then if you're lucky and the device is supported, out comes your forensic report, and you're good to go, basically. And now I'm skipping over a lot of stuff that people from the digital forensics community will complain about, but that's like the TLDR. For vehicles, it's a bit more complex because it's not just one device, it's like a big network of devices. Every single one of them is different. And you can get some piece of information, big or small, from every single one of these nodes. So, of course, the Bosch CDR tool is a tool that you can use to download event data recorder data from an airbag control module, which is really relevant for traffic accidents, for example. Dealer diagnostics you can use to basically query all sorts of modules from a vehicle. And then you have this Burla tool I mentioned, which is tailored towards infotainment systems mainly. Recently, a company called Resolute is also making a tool which focuses more on telematic systems. So this is covering more and more systems inside or modules inside a vehicle. But in my experience, still, this is not even enough. And yeah, to give you an idea, I'm going to go over some of these tools. So you have this Burla tool, which is it's a company from the US. And it's essentially both a hardware kit and software to both guide you through the process of connecting the hardware, reading out data from a system, and then analyzing the results. So earlier I showed you already a screenshot of the UI. And this is pretty much the market leader. There's only one. They have a bit of a monopoly here. But obviously it's a US company, so they focus mainly on US vehicles. And European law enforcement often runs into the issue that they just do not support European vehicles for their investigations. Then you have this Resolute tool. And to give you some background, this company already has a lot of years of experience in data recovery on SD cards that have been corrupted. So they know a lot about NAND flash, translation layers, data scrambling, all sorts of stuff going on there. And of course, raw NAND flash chips we see in vehicles, often in telematic systems or other units. And these guys cleverly jumped on the wagon where Burla was leaving some room basically on the market. They jumped in to say, okay, you can also get some traces from other modules in the vehicle based on the knowledge we already have. So they also sell this kit with hardware and software to read out data from these modules. So the current state in at least European law enforcement is that the support from these tools is often not sufficient. So Burla supports more American vehicles, Resolute supports more European vehicles, but then not really on the cutting edge infotainment side, basically. Having dealer diagnostics for all the other sorts of relevant forensic traces within law enforcement is quite costly. I don't know how many of you get to play around with dealer level diagnostics all day, but just managing to buy it, keep it up to date, for one lab is difficult enough, let alone for an entire police force of a country. And even if you have it, you have to be quite an expert to be able to use it, and use it every single time. keep it up to date. So that's a challenge in and of itself. So yeah, what do you do? We try to do our own R&D. So anything that comes up in investigations that is just not supported by commercial tools, or nothing is built out of our law enforcement agencies by themselves, we as NFI can basically do the R&D to help and assist them develop something for it. And that of course involves analyzing vehicle design and architecture to hopefully target the right module for the right question. And this is why you need automotive domain knowledge, knowledge about network architectures, tools you can use to interact with all these systems. So I'll go into the two cases, or the types of cases again. So for traffic accident reconstruction, there's actually quite good chances of finding some relevant forensic traces, because manufacturers also want to make their system more secure, more safe. So just based on their functionality alone, you can expect some traces both in airbag control modules, like the event data recorder, but we've also found some relevant traces in the ABS modules, and of course also in ADAS systems when applicable. Some other places that were nice to find traces were, we started investigating them first, and when you take a step back, you see, this is a logical place for them to store stuff, are gateway modules, because those are like at the center of the network, and they see traffic going all throughout. And if they build some kind of recording functionality there, that makes a ton of sense. So some of the stuff I personally looked at and can comfortably share is the logs from Teslas. And a colleague of mine did more effort into this, but we found some nice traces in BMW systems where they have this, I'm going to butcher this again, centrale Velespeicher. So like it's a central kind of storage for what normally are your diagnostic trouble codes. Every single module can store diagnostic trouble codes. BMW also has like a central, basically recording where they keep track of the timestamp and the speed and other useful data for investigations. So not sure if anyone is familiar with this kind of data set, but this is what basically an EDR report, or the interesting part of an EDR report, looks like. So it's some people think of this as this is the black box in your car watching your every move. It is actually just a 5-second rolling buffer that is stored whenever your airbags need to deploy or a different event happens. And it keeps track of how far you press the accelerator pedal, if you braked, if you steered, and your speed, of course. So this alone is fortunately now already quite commonplace. It is as good as standardized or required in the US, and is also recently in the EU. But if you think this is a black box, there's one company that does an even better job of recording everything. So Tesla vehicles, they continuously log quite a number of signals of how the vehicles are used for diagnostic purposes. And even on top of that continuous recording, they have a really cool feature that trumps any event data recorder. I think it's called high resolution log, based on what I saw in some decompiled diagnostic tool that is on their system. But the files have a HRL suffix. So they essentially also have this rolling buffer that is a filtered set of CAN IDs that it records or basically keeps track of in the gateway module. And then whenever a trigger occurs, and they can basically set whatever trigger is necessary with a software update. Fortunately, airbag deployment for accidents is usually a trigger. And after that trigger moment, they will record all the CAN signals. So if you can see this on the y-axis, there's the CAN arbitration ID. So they have like a subset of signals that they record in this buffer. and then there's a clear vertical line where something triggered, and then after that they record all the CAN messages. And this is like a treasure trove for traffic accident investigations, because now you don't only have like for 5 seconds, you have 2 per second maybe. Here you have like the native, like every single message going on the bus. And like I mentioned, they don't only have this mechanism, but they also continuously log data. So maybe it's a bit hard to read without going into all the details. But in their continuous logs, those are the one with the funky numbers. They essentially, for wheel speeds, is like I think one of the highest resolution signals that they record at 5 Hertz. The others are at 1 Hertz, but I mean 1 Hertz every time the vehicle is used is already quite a win for investigations. You can overlay this with the high resolution logs if needed for accidents. So for example, in this picture, there was the Tesla was doing almost 80 kilometers an hour, and then swerved over to the left a bit too far, hit oncoming traffic, so the front left wheel locked up because everything deforms and the wheel just stops moving. And then it moved over to the final position. But this level of resolution is unthinkable of in regular event data recorders. What's even more impressive than this is that their autopilot computers, they also keep track of all the cameras looking around. And now by the time I published this research, which is already quite old now, but this was not yet encrypted, but soon after they started encrypting this, and they were just so quick in continuously rolling out updates. It was unfeasible for me to keep track of this because all the signals they record, every single software version, it can change the definitions because they are so immensely vertically integrated as a company compared to like the traditional European manufacturers. For me, this was really hard to keep track of, and I had to start focusing on other stuff. But you have all the videos, and you can synchronize them with all the CAN signals that were also recorded. So if we are investigating a traffic accident, this is like, I think up there, it doesn't get any better than this in terms of traces you can find. But like I mentioned earlier, we don't only investigate traffic accidents. There's also like your regular criminals for all types of thinkable offenses. So murder, drugs, whatever. And then either they already have a suspect and they seize his or her vehicle, or there has been a crime, no suspect yet, but there is a vehicle there, and then they are interested in what is going on with that vehicle. So those are like the two situations you can encounter vehicles in investigations. And of course, again, you have the who, when, where, what questions, obviously. But those questions, they guide basically where you want your investigation to go. Sometimes you really want to do diagnostic requests on certain modules first before you dive into maybe an infotainment system. Keep in mind that the vehicle, at least when you encounter it at like a crime scene or maybe like a terror attack, then that car is both a physical and a digital crime scene. So you need to like coordinate both your like regular guys in white suits taking samples. They need to open doors, which may sound really trivial, but if you open a door, there's a chance that that is recorded in one of the modules and that there is only a limited number of records that can be in there. So you need to coordinate how you tackle this problem as well. Simple stuff like the guys in white suits or girls having their phones with them with Bluetooth still screaming. Being picked up in the vehicle when you open the door. So you need to think about this if you're doing your investigations. And obviously the one system in your vehicle that has the most user interaction is the infotainment system. I wish I could give you a very cool technical talk about all the stuff we do, but I hope I've already convinced you that it's not always possible. I did recently try to publish some other findings, so I am free to talk about that. And I hope that's interesting nonetheless. So I have one example from a system we investigated that runs Android Automotive as its operating system. I think almost all major OEMs are going to transition that way, that they're going to be running this, which is good for user data protection and security. It's a little bit bad for us because there's a lot of work to be done to get in. But once you are in, it is essentially just another Android box. And we know already like decades worth of Android research from the mobile phone world. So something we basically stumbled upon was this one database. It's a SQLite database in the directories that are related to the Google Maps application. So I won't tell you which system this is from, but it runs Android Automotive with Google services. And essentially, we looked at this database. This one specifically was, I think, 300 megabytes. But on some phones, we've seen this thing grow to gigabytes, essentially. And I really was interested. It's like, okay, this is just an Android box. People have done research on this. I couldn't find anything apart from some people asking, hey, what is in this database? And the people are like, nothing, it's not interesting. I was like, well, if it is, as the name implies, a map cache, I mean, it makes a ton of sense because from previous automotive research, we know that navigation applications, they use map tiles, basically. And you want to cache those so the map feels responsive. Or you don't, in this case, you don't need to download all the tiles every single time. And those tiles are identified by like a XYZ coordinate, so like zoom level, and then there's a grid across the entire globe that you can use to locate each tile. And if you also have a timestamp associated with that, it can give you not really a hard trace of you were here, but all those tiles combined, all that metadata might be relevant. So a lot of preface there, but if you look at the column names with the nonce and the metadata and the data nonce and the data, it's like there's definitely some crypto going on there. And there's something that definitely looks like timestamps. So I was really frustrated that none of the commercial mobile phone forensic tools, they had no support for this. If you want to know all the details about the reversing and stuff we did to figure out how to decrypt this, it's on our GitHub page. But in the end, it was possible to do so. And only looking at basically the tile coordinates, like I mentioned, you can start to draw some squares on maps. And in this example, there was a data set from a forensic researcher that essentially did something I didn't mention before, but we need to do like reference experiments. If we find traces, we need to be able to say, okay, how accurate are these? Are these reliable? And in order to do so, we need to perform experiments, see if what we think is going on is actually going on. And there's one guy who fortunately shared the usage of his mobile phone. And traditionally, you would only be able to find traces of a route calculation. So it essentially is a Google query saying, I want to navigate from here to here. So it starts at the bottom left and it navigates to the center of Washington. That is all you can do. And if you go to that URL, essentially Google will recalculate that route for you and you can plot that on a map. But if you decrypt all those map tiles for that data set, you get basically this image. And there's definitely some pattern here related to that calculated route, which might be interesting, because if you just look up the directions to go from A to B, that doesn't necessarily mean you actually went there. And when you went there, it just means you looked up the directions from A to B. But if you can also get some of these squares, like the tiles, with associated timestamps, that might give you a bit more of an idea. So this was like my gut feeling why I wanted to dive deeper into this. Not so much to do the analysis, because other people can do way better data analysis than I can do, but the fact that it's not being picked up by anyone bugged me. So for this data set, I tried to reproduce, so do another experiment. How do these tiles essentially end up here? So I made some janky Python tooling to talk to a Android emulator, essentially. That's on the left. And then in that emulator, I started Google Maps, and I did the navigation from A to B, the same directions. And then I started to synchronize in time the time it's a video. So I started to synchronize the time of the video with some of the squares on the map to the right. And that's enough talking, and I'll show you how it looks like. I shouldn't start it here. I should start it there. So there's the looking up of the directions of the destination. And that's a nice thing about an Android emulator. You can speed up the traveling. So it's not actually doing something legal speeds there, but I mean, it gets the point across. So it is essentially navigating from A to B, the same route that we got the directions from. And just by visualizing it this way, I get the strong feeling that it is directly tied to how the tiles are rendered on the map. So it's just casually doing this drive. And something to notice that on the navigation application, it's quite a high overview. So you see relatively large squares. And I think right about over there, where it needs to take the exit, and maybe you use Google Maps every day, as soon as you need to take an exit, it will zoom in so that you get a better idea of your surroundings. And now I have a few seconds to kill, but at some point it will zoom in, and you'll see the details coming up on the map of buildings, and you'll see even smaller squares on the visualization. And it definitely seems to correlate with where the tiles are being rendered on the screen. So yeah, this is pretty much the what I thought was useful to have in investigations. So it's not very network packet related, but to give you an idea of the kind of stuff we run into. Other things we work on that are more Scapy related. Unfortunately, I cannot just show you, but I hope you'll bear with me. So VCDS is like your budget ODIS to do diagnostics on Volkswagen systems. We use it, or at least law enforcement uses it all the time to read out certain values from different modules, depending on the case, what's necessary. And the things we then do with Scapy is essentially just eavesdrop on what this tool is doing, but you could do the same for any diagnostic tool. And whenever it is reading out a interesting or relevant value from a system, we essentially reproduce that functionality using Scapy. So it's not we don't often use it as an tech tool, but more like a very convenient way to do diagnostics without any other tooling attached. And one issue that we encounter, or at least see a lot in the Netherlands now, is these premium German odometer man-in-the-middle devices, essentially. So like there are some companies that offer rental car services in the Netherlands. It's German vehicles with these systems implanted essentially, and this prevents the odometer from incrementing, or at least slows it down, at least it looks like, which obviously is not legal. But it would take way too much effort to instruct police officers for every single vehicle. It's like, how does this work? Can you detect it? What was the original odometer value? So yeah, we try to assist a bit in figuring out some of the like reading from other modules that also keep track of the odometer values, and try to combine a more complete picture of if it is fraudulent, and if so, like how much fraud was being committed, stuff like that. Because yeah, this is not just German vehicles. There's like whole fancy web shops, and they try to sell this for testing or off-road purposes, where you don't want to increase the odometer, and it is absolutely not intended for road use, of course. So I hope I've given you a bit of an overview of the field of vehicle forensics. Try to explain the balancing act we are in. And I did not even touch on the special cases, because everything still applies, but then you have more data recovery techniques, trying to preserve memory from burnt or submerged vehicles. Sometimes there's not even much vehicle left to try and diagnose, then you need even more information, like how am I going to read out data from specific modules. So the challenges we face are, of course, Android Automotive OS, just to be able to get to the user data to investigate. It's all encrypted. Vehicles are now getting more into the zonal architecture or software-defined vehicles. You have hypervisors running multiple machines. Not only is it more protected in our experience, but forensics also becomes a challenge. Like, how are all these virtual machines connected? What's going on? What can I say about the traces that I see? Still unconventional file systems. Like we used to see this back with all the QNX systems. They had like a different file system for every single storage medium. So eMMC, UFS. They didn't have UFS back then. So eMMC, NOR flash, NAND flash had different file systems and different strange configurations. But some manufacturers buy stuff from them. And yeah, we need to figure out how to even mount the file system. Vehicles are getting more and more connected, so it's not just looking into data from the vehicle, but also everything around the vehicle. It's talking more on the inside of the vehicle network, but also with the more external environment, so to say. So at least in the Netherlands, like every single traffic light, or basically the system that manages the entire intersection, that's also a system with connectivity now. And of course your mobile phone apps talking to your vehicle. So yeah, like I mentioned, I hope I've given you an overview. It's pretty complex, at least I think so. And it changes so fast. So keeping up to date with all the developments is crucial. Having domain knowledge, like how are these systems built, where do I need to look for traces? This is where I think Scapy really shines. It's not just having a tool to do what we need to do, but also all the knowledge that's being shared just around this is essential for our field of work. And even though we cannot say everything, we try to share knowledge and the tools we build wherever possible. And with that, I've reached the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much for this great talk. I immediately have one question.
Sure.
You mentioned that Tesla, they can update their entire CAN map. So does this mean, or did you observe they do it, that they completely changed like their, let's say, DVC description?
Yeah.
They can yes.
So maybe a nice anecdote would be, so technically they can change the whole thing. Of course, they also still buy airbag controllers from, I think it was Porsche, and the same for ESP systems. Those you don't see changing so often because they don't control that software. For example, when the they had the Tesla Model S Plaid. It was like the really, really fast version. I observed the CAN signal definition adding 1 bit because it accommodate the top speed anymore. They added 1 bit to increase the speed that it could hold, basically. So definitely saw that in the wild. And also so they have the signal definition on the CAN messages on one hand, and for the log files, every single software version has a different mapping essentially between the CAN signals and how those relate to the signals being recorded. So it is a mess. But compared to all the other manufacturers, just to cut them some slack, they are by far, I think, the most cooperative in when they get a legal request for data from a vehicle, they have means in place to actually supply that data. And we didn't see anything wrong in what they supply versus what we can observe on that actual vehicle being stored. So that was the main reason we wanted to look into this, to be able to objectively check their claims.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for your great talk. I have one question. Like in the Tesla, we saw, for example, they record the video and everything else. Now, if I remember correctly, after reading the new GB standards, so Chinese standards, like I think it was GB 44496 or 7, they also require basically a standardized event data recorder that can be easily read out with a lot more information that's nowadays available, for example, also camera data and so on. Will we see anything similar in Europe sometime soon?
So I have to admit I'm not intimately familiar with the Chinese version of the legislation, but there are talks towards a DSSAD, so it's like a data storage system for autonomous driving. I hope I got all those letters correct. But there's definitely talks about trying to make a standardized way to investigate systems that are taking more autonomous functions, essentially, because like traditionally, you attribute all the like if you have an accident and you go too fast or you steer the wrong direction, there was only one input. It was the driver essentially, but now you have an interplay between the driver and systems assisting. So you really need to be able to distinguish those, and then the only way to investigate what the autonomous part was doing is by recording data. So there's definitely talks about that, but I don't know when that is going to be actually enforced or done.
Thanks. My idea there behind it would be more that, like, since you presented all the different tools that are available, but in general, it's basically every car manufacturer has its data somewhere else, and even the Bosch CDR is not that reliable, I would say. So depending on the car, it might not work at all. So just to have a common interface to get forensic data, basic forensic data, like not even complicated, but basic forensic data out of the car.
Yeah, so I would love for it to be like standardized, and we could use like maybe some kind of tool built on Scapy to read out everything nicely in one clear standardized fashion. But even for I think the US systems that are in that sense maybe ahead, I think their standards just say the data, if you record it, it needs to be, you need to be able to read it out using a commercially available tool or something. So that's essentially what the CDR tool is like a package of all these protocols together. But yeah, hopefully they'll improve on that with the newer system.
Thanks. More questions from the audience? Okay. One more.
Thank you for the talk. My question is about accessibility to the executable code at the same time as the traces, right? So you have to do experiments to validate that your traces are somehow, high fidelity with reality, and that does depend on like what code is executing, right? So do the procedures include code readout and storage and comparison so you can say that this trace came from that version of the software, etc.?
Yeah, so ideally you want to be able to validate all of that, yes. In practice, that takes a lot of, like you mentioned, a lot of time and effort. And in the end, investigators are paid by taxpayer money. So you have to be, yeah, use that as best as you can. For this specific research, I did do a ton of reversing, but we cannot do that for every single case or system, unfortunately.
Interesting. Thank you.
Then, thanks again for this great talk.